And people were standing up to Nimrod. And it was like, oh, you got to serve you. And Shalimar was at the one time of the princes of the host of Nimrod. He's part of his court. And when all the people at the tower were dispersed, and those that remained were scattered upon the face of the earth, Shalimar went to the land of Elam and reigned over it, and rebelled against his Lord. And in those days when Nimrod saw that the cities of the plain had rebelled, he came with pride and anger to war with Shalimar. And Nimrod assembled all his princes and subjects, about 700,000 men, and went against Shalimar. And Shalimar went out to meet him with 500,000 men, and then he prepared for battle in the valley of Babel, which is between Elam and Shinar. Babel means confusion, and probably where that tower was. And all these kings fought there. And Nimrod and his people were smitten before the people of Shalimar. And there fell from Nimrod's men about 600,000, not a good number. And Mardon the king's son fell among them. And Nimrod fled and returned in shame and disgrace to his land. And he was under subjection to Shalimar for a long time. Everything was flipped. And Shalimar returned to his land and sent princes to his host, to the kings that dwelt around him, to Arioch, king of Elisar, and to Tidal, king of Goyim, and made a covenant with them, and they were all obedient to his commands. And it was the 15th year of Abraham's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 7th year of life of Abraham. And the Lord appeared to Abraham in that year, and he said to him, I am the Lord who brought thee out from Ur, Casdan, to give thee the land for an inheritance. Now therefore walk before me and be perfect, and keep my commandments. For in thee and thy seed will I give this land for an inheritance, from the river Mitzrayim unto the great river Euphrates. And thou shalt come to thy fathers in peace and in good age, and the 4th generation shall return there in this land, and shall inherit it forever. And Abraham built an altar, and he called upon the name of the Lord who appeared to him. And he brought up sacrifices upon the altar to the Lord. And at the time Abraham remained and went to Haran to see his father and mother, and his father's household. And Abraham and his wife and all the belongings to him returned to Haran. And Abraham dwelt in Haran for 5 years. And many of the people of Haran, about 72 men, followed Abraham. And Abraham taught them the instruction of the Lord in his ways. And he taught them to know the Lord. In those days the Lord appeared to Abraham in Haran. And he said to him, Behold, I've spoken of these 20 years back, saying, Go forth from the land, from thy birthplace, and from thy father's house. He took his father with him. Remember, he took Terah, he took Lot, he took his brother, Dan, I think his name, to go forth from the land, from thy birthplace, and from thy father's house, to the land which I have shown thee, to give it unto thy children. And there in that land I will bless thee, and make thee a great nation, and make thy name great. In thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Now therefore rise, go forth from this place, thou, thy wife, and all thy belongings to thee, and every one born in our house, and all the souls that made in Haran, and bring them out with thee from here, and arise to return to the land of Canaan. And Abraham arose and took his wife Sarai and all his belongings to him, and all that was born to him in his house, and the souls which they had made in Haran, and they came out to go to the land of Canaan. And Abraham went and returned to the land of Canaan, according to the word of the Lord. And Lot, the son of his brother Haran, went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old. 20 years he dwelt in Haran. He lived after God told him to go to Canaan, and he took his family with him. God said, separate from your father's house, and just you and your wife and your servants. Just show you Abraham had a slow start. Now he's 75. 25 years of that elapsed. And Abraham returned, verse 26, and Abraham returned to the land of Canaan, according to the word of the Lord. And Lot, Lot was a thorn in his flesh. And Lot, the son of his brother Haran, went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old, and he went forth from Haran to return to the land of Canaan. So he's really 75 when he started his mission. And he came to the land of Canaan according to the word of the Lord to Abraham, and he pitched his tent, and he dwelt in the plain of Mamre. With him Lot his brother's son, and all the belongings to him. And the Lord again appeared to Abraham, and said, to thy seed will I give this land. And there built an altar to the Lord, who appeared to him, which is still in this day in the plain of Mamre. In those days there was in the land of Shinar a wise man who had understanding in all wisdom, and of a beautiful appearance, a good-looking guy. He was poor and indigent, homeless. His name was Rachion, and he was hard set to support himself. He wanted to find a way he can eat, and he resolved to go to Egypt, to Osriser, Osriris, the son of Anam, king of Egypt, to show the king his wisdom. For perhaps he was a very smart guy. For perhaps he might find grace in his sight to raise him up and give him maintenance. And Rachion did so. And when Rachion came to Egypt, he asked the inhabitants of Egypt, concerning the king. And the inhabitants of Egypt told him the custom of the king of Egypt, for it was then the custom of the king of Egypt, that he went from his royal palace and was seen abroad only one day in the year. One day in the year you got to see the king. And after that the king would return to his palace to remain there. And on the day when the king went forth, he passed judgment in the land. And everyone having a suit came before the king that day to obtain his request. And when Rachion heard of this custom in Egypt, and that he could not come into the presence of the king, he grieved greatly, and was very sorrowful. And in the evening Rachion went out and found a house in ruin, formerly a bakehouse in Egypt. And he abode there all night in bitterness of soul, and pinched with hunger, and slept, and sleep was removed from his eyes. He was living in hard times. And Rachion considered within himself that he should do in the town until the king made his appearance, and how he might maintain himself there. And he arose in the morning and walked about, and met in his way those who sold vegetables and various sorts of seed, which they supplied the inhabitants. And Rachion wished to do the same, in order to get a maintenance in the city. But he was unacquainted with the custom of the people, and he was like a blind man among them. And he went and obtained vegetables to sell them for his support. And the rabble assembled about him and ridiculed him, and took his vegetables from him, and left him nothing. Yeah, a good crowd there. And he rose up from there in bitterness of soul, and went sighing to the bakehouse to which he had remained all night before, and he slept there the second night. And on that night again, he reasoned within himself how he could save himself from starvation. And he devised a scheme how to act. And he rose up in the morning and acted ingeniously, and went and hired 30 strong men of the rabble, carrying their war instruments in their hand. And he led them to the top of the Egyptian top of the Egyptian sepulchre, and he placed them there. And he commanded them, saying, Thus saith the king, strengthen yourselves and be valiant men, and let no man be buried here until 200 pieces of silver be given. Then he might be buried. And those men did according to the order of Rachion to the people of Egypt the whole of that year. And in 8 months' time, Rachion and his men gathered great riches of silver and gold. And Rachion took a great quantity of horses and other animals, and he hired more men, and he gave them horses, and they remained with him. And when the year came around at the end time, the king went forth into the town, and all the inhabitants assembled together to speak to him concerning the work of Rachion and his men. And the king went forth on an appointed day, and all the Egyptians came before him and cried unto him, saying, May the king live forever. What is this thing thou dost in the town to thy servants, and not to suffer a dead body to be buried until so much silver and gold be given? Was there ever like unto this done in the whole earth, from the days of the former kings, even from the days of Adam, until this day, that the dead should be buried only for a set price? Oh, how much does it cost to bury someone today? You see, some things never change. We know it to be the custom of kings to take a yearly tax from the living, but not only do this, but from the dead also thou exactest a tax day by day. Now, O king, we can no more bear this, for the whole city is ruined on this account, and dost thou not know it? And when the king heard all that they had spoken, he was wroth. He was very angry, and his anger burned with him at this affair. He had known nothing of it. And the king said, Who and where is he that dares to do this wicked thing in my land without my command? Surely you will tell me. And they told him all the works of Rachion and his men, and the king's anger was aroused. And he ordered Rachion and his men to be brought before him. And Rachion took about 1,000 children, sons and daughters, clothed them in silk and embroidery, and set them up on horses, and sent them to the king by means of his men. He also took a great quantity of silver and gold and precious stones, and strong and beautiful horses, as a present for the king, in which he came before the king and bowed down to the earth before him. And the king and his servants and all the inhabitants of Egypt wondered at the work of Rachion, and they saw his riches and the present he had brought the king. And it greatly pleased the king. He wondered at it. And when Rachion sat before him, the king asked him concerning all his works. And Rachion spoke all these words wisely before the king, his servants, and all the inhabitants of Egypt. And when the king heard the words of Rachion and his wisdom, Rachion found grace in his sight. And he met with grace and kindness all the servants of the king from all the inhabitants of Egypt, on account of his wisdom and excellent speeches. And from that time they loved him exceedingly. And the king answered and said to Rachion, Thy name shall be no more called Rachion, but Pharaoh shall be thy name, since thou didst exact a tax from the dead. And he called his name Pharaoh. So that's where we get the introduction of the name Pharaoh. And the king and his subjects loved Rachion for his wisdom, and they consulted with all the inhabitants of Egypt to make him prefect under the king, like the governor. And the inhabitants of Egypt and all the wise men did so, and it was made a law in Egypt. And they made Rachion Pharaoh prefect under Oswiris, king of Egypt. And Rachion Pharaoh governed over Egypt daily, administering justice to the whole city. But Oswiris, the king, would judge the people of the land one day in the year when he went out to make his appearance. And Rachion Pharaoh cunningly usurped the government of Egypt, and he exacted a tax from all inhabitants of Egypt. And all the inhabitants of Egypt greatly loved Rachion Pharaoh. And they made a decree to call every king that should reign over them, their seed in Egypt, Pharaoh. That's where we got Pharaoh from. Therefore, all the kings that reigned in Egypt from that time forward were called Pharaoh until this day, because of Rachion. Now, this is something you didn't know. I bet you in the history books, even some of you that are very well read in history didn't know where the word Pharaoh came from. Now you know. It's good to read the Apocrypha, isn't it? And in that year, there was a heavy famine throughout the land of Canaan, and the inhabitants of the land could not remain on account of the famine, for it was very grievous. Now remember, God told Abraham, this is the place. Watch what Abraham do. And Abraham and all his belongings to him rose and went down to Egypt. Abraham said, I'm out of here. It's a famine. God told me this is the place. I'm gone. I'm starving here. And went down to Egypt on account of the famine. And when they went at the brook of Mizraim, there remained there some time to rest from the fatigue of the road. And Abraham and Sarai were walking at the border of the brook of Mizraim. And Abraham beheld his wife Sarah, that she was very beautiful. He looked and said, man, I got a gorgeous wife. My wife is fine. And see, back in the days, it didn't profit to have a good, beautiful wife, because she could be taken if you weren't strong enough. And Abraham said to his wife Sarai, since God has created thee with such a beautiful countenance, I am afraid the Egyptians, lest they should slay me and take thee away. For the fear of God is not in these places. Now you're getting to see the human side of Abraham. This is a side a lot of you didn't know. Now he's turned into a rat, about to pimp his wife out, and become a liar on top of it. You don't look like a father of faith right here. Surely then thou shalt do this. Say thou art my sister to all that may ask thee, in order that it may be well with me, and that we may live and not be put to death. And Abraham commanded the same all that came with him to Egypt on account of the famine. And his nephew Lot he commanded, saying, if the Egyptians asked thee concerning Sarai, she is the sister of Abraham. Told everybody to lie. Not only did he lie, but he got everybody else to lie. Father of faith. Telling everybody else to lie. This is my sister, man. He's like my wife. And yet, with all those orders, Abraham did not put confidence in them. But he took Sarah and placed her in a chest and concealed it among their vessels. For Abraham was greatly concerned about Sarai on account of the wickedness of the Egyptians. So he hid her in a trunk. He wasn't even sure of the lie, so he said, well, just in case, let me just hide her. And Abraham and all his belongings with him rose up from the brook of Mizraim and came to Egypt. And they had scarcely entered the gates of the city when the guard stood up to them, saying, give tithe to the king for what you have. Did you guys get that? Tithe been around a long time. Give tithe 10% to the king from what you have. Then you may come into the town. And Abraham and those that were with him did so. And Abraham with the people that were with him came to Egypt. And when they came, they brought the chest in which Sarai was concealed. And the Egyptians saw the chest. And the Egyptian servants approached Abraham, saying, What hast thou there in the chest? We have not seen. Now open thou the chest, and give tithe to the king of all that it contains. And Abraham said, This chest I will not open, but all you demand upon it I will give. And Abraham's officers answered Abraham and said, It is a chest of precious stones. Give us a tenth thereof. And Abraham said, All that you desire I will give, but you must not open the chest. And the king officers pressed Abraham, and they reached the chest and opened it with force. And they saw, and behold, a beautiful woman was in the chest. And when the officers of the king beheld Sarai, they were struck with admiration of her beauty. And all the princes and servants of Pharaoh assembled to see Sarai, for she was very beautiful. And the king's officers ran and told Pharaoh all they had seen, and they praised Sarai to the king. And the Pharaoh ordered her to be brought, and the woman came before the king. And Pharaoh beheld Sarai, and was pleased, and she pleased him exceedingly, and he was struck by her beauty. And the king rejoiced greatly on her account, and made presents to those who brought him the tidings concerning her. And the woman was then brought to Pharaoh's house. And Abraham grieved on account of his wife. He prayed to the Lord to deliver her from the hands of Pharaoh. And Sarah also prayed at that time, O Lord God, thou didst not tell my lord Abraham to go from this land and from his father's house to the land of Canaan. And thou didst promise to do well with him if he would perform thy commandments. Now behold, we have done that which thou didst command us, and we left our land and our families, and we went to a strange land, to a people whom we have not known before. And we came to this land to avoid the famine, and an evil accident has befallen me. Now therefore, O Lord God, deliver us and save us from the hand of this oppressor, and do well with me for the sake of thy mercy. And the Lord hearkened to the voice of Sarai, and the Lord sent an angel to deliver Sarai from the power of Pharaoh. And the king came and sat before Sarai, and behold, an angel of the Lord was standing over him. And he appeared to Sarai and said to her, Do not fear, for the Lord has heard thy prayer. And the king approached Sarai and said to her, What is this man? What is that man to thee who brought thee hither? And she said, He is my brother. And the king said, It is incumbent upon us to make him great, to elevate him, to do unto him all good, which thou shalt command us. And at that time the king sent to Abraham silver and gold and precious stones. See, now you get what I said when I said he pimped his wife out. He was a rat. And thou shalt command us. And at that time the king sent to Abraham silver, gold, precious stone in abundance, together with cattle, men, servants, maid servants. He got cashed out on Sarah. And the king ordered Abraham to be brought, and he sat in the court of the king's house. And the king greatly exalted Abraham on that night. And the king approached to speak to Sarai, and he reached out his hands to touch her, when the angel smote him heavily. He was terrified. He refrained from reaching to her. And when the king came near to Sarah, the angel smote him to the ground and acted thus to him the whole night. And the king was terrified. So every time he reached to sleep with Sarah, This angel's whacking him with a sword. And the king was terrified. And the angel on that night smote heavily all the servants of the king and his whole household on account of Sarai. And there was a great lamentation that night amongst the people of Pharaoh's house. And Pharaoh, seeing the evil that befell him, said, surely on account of this woman has this thing happened to me. And he removed himself at some distance from her and spoke pleasing words to her. And the king said to Sarah, tell me, I pray thee, concerning the man whom thou camest here. And Sarah said, this man is my husband. And I said to thee that he was my brother, for I was afraid, lest thou shouldest put him to death through wickedness. And the king kept away from Sarah. And the plague of the angel of the Lord ceased from him and his household. And Pharaoh knew that he was smitten on account of Sarah. And the king was greatly astonished at this. And in the morning the king called for Abraham and said to him, what is this thou hast done to me? Why didst thou say, she is my sister? Owing to which I took her unto me a wife, and this heavy plague has therefore come upon me and my household. Now therefore, here is thy wife. Take her and go from our land, lest we all die on her account. And Pharaoh took more cattle, men servants and maid servants, and silver and gold to give to Abraham, and he returned unto him Sarah his wife. And the king took a maiden, which he begat by his concubines, and he gave her to Sarai for a handmaid. And the king said to his daughter, it is better for thee, my daughter, to be a handmaid in this man's house than to be a mistress in my house, after we have beheld the evil that befell us on account of this woman. And Abraham arose, and he and all the belongings to him went away from Egypt. And Pharaoh ordered some of his men to accompany him, and all that dwelt with him. And Abraham returned to the land of Canaan. Now he came back very wealthy. He went down there sinning. He got cashed out. And Abraham returned to the land of Canaan, to the place where he had made the altar. Went right back to the altar place, symbol of dying to self, where he at first had pitched his tent. He returned to the same place that he backslid from. And Lot, his son of Haran, Abraham's brother, had a heavy stock of cattle, flocks, herds, and tents, for the Lord was bountiful to him on account of Abraham. He was Lot, which means greedy, was a hanger-on to Abraham's blessings, and bountiful to him on account of Abraham. And when Abraham was dwelling in the land, the herdsmen of Lot quarreled with the herdsmen of Abraham, for their property was too great for them to remain together in the land. And the land could not bear them on account of all their cattle. And when Abraham's herdsmen went to feed their flock, they would go into the fields of the people of the land. But the cattle of Lot's herdsmen did otherwise, for they were suffered to feed in the fields of the people of the land. And the people of the land saw this occurs daily, and they came to Abraham and quarreled with him on account of Lot's herdsmen. And Abraham said to Lot, what is this that thou art doing to me, to make me despicable to the inhabitants of the land, that thou orderest our herdsmen to feed thy cattle in the fields of other people? Dost thou not know that I am a stranger in this land amongst the children of Canaan? And why wilt thou do this unto me? And Abraham quarreled daily with Lot on account of this. But Lot would not listen to Abraham, and he continued to do the same. And the inhabitants of the land came and told him. And Abraham said unto Lot, how long wilt thou be to me for a stumbling block with the inhabitants of the land? Now beseech thee, let thee and me be no more quarreling between us, for we are kinsmen. But I pray thee, separate from me. Go and choose a place where thou mayest dwell with thy cattle and all thy belongings to thee. But keep thyself a distance from me, that thou and thy household, and be not afraid in going from me. For if anyone do any injury to thee, let me know, and I will avenge my cause from him. Only remove from me. And when Abraham had spoken all these words to Lot, then Lot arose and lifted up his eyes toward the plain of Jordan. That's very important. Lot means greedy. And he saw the whole of the place was well watered and good for man, as well as affording pasture for the cattle. And Lot went from Abraham to that place. And there he pitched his tent, and he dwelt in Sodom. Now you know how he got to Sodom. And there were separated from each other. And Abraham dwelt in the plain of Nimrod, which would be more desert-like. And he took the well-watered place, which is in Hebron. And he pitched his tent there, and Abraham remained in that place many years. At that time, Shalimar, king of Elam, sent to all the neighboring kings, to Nimrod, king of Shinar, who was then under his power, and to Tidal, king of Goyim, and Arioch, king of Elasar, with whom he made a covenant, saying, Come to me and assist me, that we may smite all the towns of Sodom and all its inhabitants, for they have rebelled against me these 13 years. And these 4 kings went up with all their camps, about 800,000 men, and they went as they were, and smote every man they found in their road. And 5 kings of